Hi, everybody. This is Ben Webster, and welcome to another episode of the Scaling Alpha podcast. Today, I'm joined by Sia Gholami, co-founder and CEO of Ahuora, an AI-driven investment management firm founded in 2017. He holds a PhD in computer science with a thesis on efficient large language models, has published research in NLP and information retrieval, and spent 7 years concurrently as an applied science lead at Amazon building AI and machine learning models at scale. Sia, over to you. Could you take us through your background as a scientist, how you first got interested in applying machine learning to financial markets, and welcome to the pod.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate it. Yeah. So, as you mentioned, my background is in computer science. I have a bachelor, master, PhD computer science. I worked in tech for a long time. And then back in 2016, I
Hmm.
was basically had a little bit of money. I wanted to invest. I didn't want it to do ETFs. So I thought that maybe I can invest it myself. So I looked into different ways and different models and stuff like that to
Was this after Amazon?
it was before Amazon.
Before
It
Amazon?
was before Amazon,
Please
and
continue.
right, yep, and right after that, I joined Amazon. Yeah. So it all started with a simple question, right? And as you know, our scientists love questions, right?
Yep. Yep.
And the question is that if I give you all the information you need about a company, can you tell me how much does this company worth, right? So this is a simple question, right? So how much does this company worth? But it's not very straightforward, right? There are some few ways that people value companies. A lot of people are using P ratios and stuff like that. Some people are looking into discounted cash flows, but all of these methods have flaws, and you kind of see in the market that there's some basically examples that they're not working that well. So it's
So
all
what do you mean by all the information? Obviously, so I have a physics background. I'm very scientific, method oriented. That's my degree was in physics. So obviously, it's impossible to have all the information. But when you say all the information, are you say all the publicly available financial document content information that's being released by the company? Is that what you mean?
right, and that's basically that's a rabbit hole by itself. But yeah,
Yes,
let's
it
talk
is.
about the
Yeah, yeah. I just
let's
wanted to
let's
find the problem so our viewers understand what you kind of the bounds of what the information that you in this example, for example.
Yeah, and we can basically look at it in two ways, right? Let's say that, yeah. So first of all the public information is good, but let's say that you are even a CEO of a company and you
Yeah.
have you have even the information that's not public. Can
Yep.
you, as a CEO, tell me how much your company worth? Because
No.
that is not, it's not easy. And you've seen CEO of public companies, they've made a lot of mistakes in investing in their own companies and predicting the future for their own companies with their own money. So yeah, that's an interesting, the science experiment, and try to see what is fundamentally the value of a company given that you have the information that you need on that front. Yeah.
Yep. And so you've got this problem where it's hard to obviously integrate all that information, but moreover, there's some inherent knowledge that we don't all have access to, right? So kind of reframing the problem, right? You could have five companies in the same industry competing, like on the surface looks like a very similar approach to what the services they're providing and the problems they're solving, but one could have a P ratio that is much higher than the rest of the cohort. What information is driving that, right? What, and maybe why is the market valuing that company higher? So and maybe I'm phrasing the problem wrong, but so a lot of the tried and true rules that people have invested by, or the rules that we create may not be what the rules that other people look at, but we built for ourselves. They may not always be true. There's always exceptions. There's always some piece of information we're missing that could be driving a different behavior in the market, right? Am I framing the problem? If I'm not, that's okay. I'm trying to understand where you're coming from on how you're looking at kind of this informational and subjective results problem that you've kind of framed.
Yeah, I think that yes, you frame it correctly. So one of the things that we look at is in market itself. There's a lot of people are trying to predict the short term the short-term price action of these companies, right? So I'm looking at Apple today. What's the number tomorrow?
Hmm.
And this is a lot of people are working on it. A lot of smart people are using a lot of different tools to do that. But what we do, we would look into the long-term direction of these securities, right?
Hmm.
And what that would enable us to basically ignore the short-term volatility, right?
Okay.
And there's some benefits to that as well because the markets in the short term, it can be volatile based on, the factors that are not in your control or you don't oversee or
Hmm.
anything like that. But if you look at it in the long term, and for example, by long term we mean anything more than 2 years,
Okay.
right? I remember that at the beginning, I was reading a paper, and the paper was suggesting that any strategy that would come to fruition in 2 years, it does not. So basically, it's outside of our scope. We don't
Mm.
look into that.
Got
And
it.
I was thinking that yeah, so I do have the patience for these strategies to show me the results in 2 years, and we are that investor. They are a lot of firms that don't care too much about it. If you are, working in a hedge fund, you go to your boss and say that I come up with something that's going to show your results in 2 years. They're probably not that interested in that because no one would know what would happen in 2 years. You might change job, your boss might change jobs, your investors might change. But for us, we would take that as a fundamental building block of the system, right? So we ignore the volatility and the short-term action. We will look into the long-term direction. And with that lens, you kind of have a little bit more flexibility on trying to figure out what is the right signal to show you the long-term direction of these companies and try to ignore the noise in the short term.
So let's focus on that, and let's talk about it from the perspective of your background, right? So you're looking for value creation over 2+ year period. And then so sitting in your seat as a data scientist who's got years of experience in machine learning, large language models, trying to deploy machine learning at scale for big firms like Amazon. How do you approach looking at the markets over a 2+ year time frame that may be different from a traditional bottoms up investor that is reading through documents and trying to make a lot of qualitative and quantitative assessments?
Right. Yeah. So our approach is that we use a lot of AI, right? And the AI itself would look into a lot of different data sources and try to build a world view of the market, right? So
Got
it's
it.
just very important to have the right context, right? So we process a lot of text. My background is in natural language processing. I
Hmm.
I've done a lot of research on that, and text by itself holds a lot of information, right? So
Yep.
there's different layers to it. So what do you say in text, and what do you didn't say in text, and
Hmm.
what is your competitors are saying.
Yep.
I usually give an example of even a single word, right? Yes, right. It by itself has a little bit of meaning, but if you have the right context, it would give you a lot more meaning, right? So if you, for example, receive a text from your best friend and it would just say yes, and you know that these guys are watching football right now, and their team is scoring a goal, you kind of understand that context.
You know
And
exactly yes means something good happened, right?
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. So you
Yep.
you you know what
For
happens.
that team. Yep.
Yep. So yeah, and this is basically the same thing applies to the market as well. So you kind of at the first layer, you take a look at the information in the text, and once you combine that with a lot more information and the whole context of what's happening in the world, you have a better understanding of what are the things that are happening, especially if you are looking for the long-term directions and not just the short-term fluctuations.
So you mentioned your background is NLP, right? And NLP is a different from large language models, right? Um, you're still I imagine you're still using NLP heavily as part of investment research process. What's the line between the two? What is NLP good at versus using LLMs? and what is LM's good at versus NLP for investment research purposes?
Yeah, so this is the terminology in our field. It changes a lot, right? So
Yep.
I'm an
Yep.
old timer. Back
Yep.
in our day, we would call everything anything that would touch text would have been called NLP, so natural language processing. But over
Mm-hmm.
the years, the terminology changed. Right now, a lot of people are using LLMs, large language models.
Mm-hmm.
We had language models for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, people after 2017, when the famous paper came out for the transformers,
Yep.
people are added a large piece to it. So it's large language models. But right now, when people say LLMs, they usually refer to frontier models from, for example, OpenAI or
Yep.
Anthropic and stuff like that. And
Yep.
these guys are not just language models. So they have a language model and they combine it with reinforcement learning,
Yep.
something that came out of Google with the AlphaGo. And yeah, so these terms change a lot.
Yes, they
I
do.
use them. I use them interchangeably, but yeah, the main concept is that if you're processing text, if you're basically ingesting or producing text or anything like that, back in my day, we were call it NLP. Right now, people are usually call it LLMs and
Yep.
AI and stuff like that. Yep.
Got it. So when you, in the context of Ahura, you're primarily using kind of more of the frontier models, the kind of newer LLM technology.
We do have our own models.
Oh wow.
So yeah, our models are ourselves, and we basically lose a lot of different technologies,
Mm-hmm.
including the large language models, including reinforcement learning and a lot other algorithms that we experiment on, and these models are changing a lot. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of different iterations on it, and a lot of different experiments that we run to make sure that we always move at the frontier piece and at the edge. Yeah.
Got it. So reading your background, there was stuff about information retrieval that you were focused on that as a problem, right? I'm assuming with NLP at the time, and now obviously evolving into what is now called LLMs. We know that LLMs are pretty good at a narrative text, right? Obviously, there's contextual issues where you really need to focus it and keep the context windows low to get the best results. But and then there's also issues with information retrieval from tables and things like that, right? So, a lot of I talk to a lot of investment managers, and they're using LLMs for very kind of bespoke, in a lot of ways, spur of the moment tasks. They're not really using it, how should I say, broadly in investment management or research task pipelines, right? Because of the aforementioned problems I've just mentioned. Tell me about how you, obviously without giving away your secret sauce, but you obviously have an amazing background in information retrieval. You know the pros and cons probably better than most anyone on these language models, and how it reflects to the importance of accuracy in finance, right? You're managing people's money, right? How do you get around some of these issues to make sure that your research is as accurate as possible to account for some of these problems in the fundamental technologies?
Yeah, so that's an interesting point. And with AI models today, right? So these are powerful tools. You can use it in different ways. One of the things that I've seen a lot of folks are using it is to just automate the mundane tasks that they have, which is usually the first step of using these models. So, for example, you give it a document and say, summarize this document, or search for this piece for me, or just write a piece of code, for example, or something like that. And they're pretty good at that piece. But overall, they do have limitations, right? So there is a famous saying from George Box, which is the early pioneers of machine learning, and he was mentioning that all models are wrong, but some are useful. So
Hmm.
yeah, so same applies here, right? So if you kind of need to be aware of the limitations of the model. Anyone that's working in machine learning, they always know that if you ask a question of the model will give you an answer,
Hmm.
but whether that answer is right or wrong, so that's basically up to you to figure it out, right?
Yep. Yep.
One of the things that we do is that we have a number of different models that each one of them would look into different pieces and trying to come up with with its own tasks. We
Mhm.
use them as decision support systems, and this is one of the old terms as well. But this is something that would give you more information so that you can make the right decision rather than just give everything to the model and say that, yeah, just
Mhm.
tell me which stocks to buy. I mean, you can
Yep.
do it, and these guys can give you an answer, but whether that answer is the right one or not, you have to figure it out yourself.
Makes sense. So, a human in the loop, as the industry likes to call it, is still very, very necessary. What types of things that, without getting too specific to like, things that you don't want to reveal about your secret sauce per se, what type of things do you have, types of research tasks, let's say, or tasks in general that you employ for AI? Do you have a high confidence in the outputs? What type of tasks do you feel you still need even a high degree of human supervision or human verification?
Yeah, so overall the AI models, they're pretty good at processing information at speed, right? So for example, with us, we are a lean team. We don't have a lot of folks, and the AI models would take a holistic view of the market, of everything in every market, every security, all the
Hmm.
time. They don't take breaks. They don't need a lot of time processing information.
Yep.
So the ingestion and processing piece is something that the AI models today are very good at. Right. And we use that to just basically automate a lot of tasks that the humans would, traditionally take a lot of time doing. So, for example, let's say that if a new earnings come out, and the models would take a look at that numbers and text and everything and extract all the information that's needed in a matter of seconds. While if you have people looking into that, it would take a lot of time. But at the end of the day, when you have all these information gathered and processed, you would need the humans to take a look at it and just basically do, we call it a sanity check, to make sure that everything is correct. There's no
Hmm.
overfitting, there's no hallucinations, everything makes sense. The risk management typically stays with the humans. And yeah, that's how we approach this, and making sure that the models are correct.
So I would play devil's advocate to a portion of that, right? I agree with the second part for the most part. The human verification, the hallucinations, that I think that's vitally important. There's certain things we may need less of that because again, AI is good at the certain types of tasks. It's the first part. I agree on the first part where they're really good at processing a lot of information really fast and gathering some key facts and this, that, and other, summarizing. But you also have to be very specific in the tasks, right? If you ask for, tell me what the CEO says, right? Or, what management says about this issue or that issue, well, is it going to necessarily go to the latest transcript? Does it have access to the latest transcript? Does it have access to the MD&A and the what information is prioritized? Where do you point it? And probably that's something you assumed is kind of table stakes if you want to use AI, that you have to have very specific guardrails to make sure it's looking at the information you need and assessing the information, and coming back with something valuable for you. But I think for a lot of new time, I think a lot of people are playing with LLMs, a lot of investment managers, but they're not as familiar with the problems as you are. So tell me a little bit more about how you set up those guardrails. So even those initial kind of information retrieval and organization tasks are done well.
Yeah, that is correct, right? So the right way of looking at it is, first of all, the data is very important, right? So you
Hmm.
kind of need to have the right data. You kind of need to have something that differentiated data,
Yep.
and something that can be reliable, high quality, and stuff like that. And the second piece is that we have seen that the AI models, there's two ways of looking at it. There are some generalists, right? So it would take a look at everything, it would do everything for everyone.
Hmm.
And there are some specialists, right? So
Hmm.
it would basically, you build a model that would only look for a specific signal,
Hmm.
and from that signal you would take that and use it in different pieces, either directly output it to the portfolio manager, or they would use that signal to input it into a different AI model.
Got it.
But yeah, we've seen at this point, and there's a lot of change in the industry, and the pace in the AI research is pretty good. So it might change in the future. But right now, for specific for finance, we believe that a lot of specialists that will look into specific signals, they work a lot better together than just having, a couple of generalists that would do everything. And you ask them very high level questions of, yeah, I mean, how does the CEO feel about the company? It would give you an answer. It would tell you, but whether you can use it or not, yeah, that's debatable.
We talk about it here. You have to have the right tool for the job, right? And you have to have the right ingredients to apply that tool to, right?
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
like in this case, data, content, information. So it seems like I'll use the word swarm. You have a swarm of specialists, let's say, right, that are highly focused on what they do well, right? And those specialists, you've built the guardrails around them so that they know what their task is and they stay on task. Is that a good way of putting it?
Exactly. Yep. Yep. That's the right way. And yeah, so these things is very fascinating to see how they
Hmm.
work together, and how these models evolve. And
Hmm.
yeah, so this is an active area of research. A lot of folks are working on it, including myself. And
Hmm.
yeah, I am excited about what's coming in the future.
So how do you deal as the models get better and better and better? How do you stay on top of it all? Because as they get better, tools that you may have built may start working differently, right? Like we've seen language models even as a new version comes out, it gets better at some things, but actually starts getting worse at other things, right? That it was better at before. How do you deal with that as you are honing and or refining your specialist tools? How do you stay on top of that? And better yet, how does a manager, investor who doesn't have your expertise, what are the things they have to worry about and they have to be careful of?
Yeah, so these models, right, they're very powerful, but you need to have the right framework and right, we call it the research methodology to
Hmm.
use them, right? So
Hmm.
there's no silver bullet here that you would do one thing and it would basically solve all the problems. Constant monitoring, constant testing of these models, they're needed. And yeah, one of the things that we've seen is that the models will become obsolete pretty quickly. The regime change, the market changes, the people attitude toward the market changes, and all of these things would need you to come up with the next version pretty quickly and
Hmm.
be able to deploy that and use that. So yeah, there is everything is going faster these days, and you basically need to be on top of it to be able to achieve your goals.
Interesting. So, taking a step back, right? It sounds that your area of obviously your expertise is very apropos for the time we're living in, right? From the perspective of your background with NLP, LMs, and what have you. Let's talk about just investing. One of the things I'm reading about what you do is you're not really trying to identify like what does the market consensus think about a company. You're trying to find the underlying core drivers that are the engine of company of value of success. How do you h- take compare how you would generally go about it if you did not have the tools that you have now, and contrast that to how you identify those drivers better using AI and the modern tools.
Right. So the AI and modern tools, right? They would give a lot of insights for us. For us specifically, we approach this as fundamentally AI driven. People call it AI native approach, right? So
Right.
if I didn't have AI, this wouldn't work at all. Right. It's
Got it.
it's not that I would take something that a human do and automate it with AI. It's completely different from the scratch. And
So,
yeah,
so
so
essentially, because you built this from the ground up, knowing you have these tools, it's empowered you to lay out a investment research process, how should I say, the characteristics of how you would like to invest in a completely different way than if you were building it from the scratch, from the ground up without these tools.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So one of
Tell us
the
more about
one of
that.
sure, yeah, one of the good things about AI and machine learning itself, right? They're very good at, if I oversimplify it, right?
Okay.
Super oversimplification here. They're good at recognizing patterns and figuring out signals. One of the things that I usually say is that back in the day we had a lot of research done on how to distinguish between pictures of cats versus dogs, right?
Yep. Oh, and we were all unwitting participants helping them with their research.
Yep, yep. That was a
CAPTCHA.
hard problem. Yeah, that was a
Yeah.
hard problem back in the day. So
Yep.
I remember that people were, they were trying to, for example, see the shape of the ears. It was pointy. It was cat. It was not pointy. It was dogs, and
Yeah.
different rule based approach to it. So right now, what you do is that you show the AI, million pictures of cats, a million pictures of dogs, and they will say that, yep, this is a cat, this is a dog. And you don't need to encode anything, right? So it would
Yep.
basically learn from examples.
Yep.
And this is the fundamental approach of neural nets, and basically the foundation to everything that we have today. And
Mhm.
the same applies to finance as well, right? So the things that humans do is fundamentally different than what AI is doing, right? So
Mhm.
AI would take all of this information, everything that you can throw at it,
Mhm.
and it would process all of that and would say that, yeah, based on the information that I have and everything that's built, this is these are the signals. And you obviously need to architect it. You need to look for everything that's happening there, and you need to figure out what is the right approach there, what is the right building blocks of these models. But yeah, this is fundamentally different than what you would done before, with the rule based approach and everything like that.
Got it. Got it. I'm gonna look at it from a slightly different angle. Without naming names, I've talked to a lot of managers. One thing's fundamental manager. I'm managers of all types, quants, blah blah. But I've talked to a number of fundamental managers who are the most constrained because of the sheer amount of information that they have to process to find the insights they want. And it's just impossible to have access to all that. Kind of bring it back to what we talked about earlier. All that public information. It's not a fire hose, it's a raging waterfall that's coming at them every day for every company they cover and market they have to understand, right? What kind of pose the fundamental problem? They're trying to use top-down AI, right? The generalists that you and I spoke about, right? And they're finding they can't use it for high quality research. They can use it for bespoke certain tasks, but it doesn't really give them an edge, and it suffers from problems that we've all discussed. But I've talked to a select few managers, and the ones who have built their custom tools per se, their custom workflows, the specialists, right? Help them complete these certain tasks with high integrity, right? These managers have all experienced a combination of the following. One is they've been able to rapidly increase the breadth of their research. And what I mean by breadth of their research, they can now, for every company, they can now look at more data sources. They can review more content because they have AI, right? Secondly, they can go deeper, right? With these tools that they have, they can now go deeper in every company, right? And what they found through the automation is two things. One thing happens, but they each make a different choice on how to respond. One is they can now actually source more ideas, more higher quality ideas, and they can do the deep dives necessary, the deep dives that they never were able to do as much. They had very limited resources. Maybe they could do a deep dive on a new company once a month, right? They also have to monitor existing companies, so that's a lot of work as well. So every single one of them has been faced with this choice. We now have a greater number of opportunities that we can invest in and we can research effectively. Now I can either keep my portfolio concentrated, but with just choosing the best of the ideas, or I can actually increase the number of holdings. Most of them actually go that direction, was what I'm finding. The other thing they're finding is that they can monitor their existing ideas better, and they can find losers earlier, and they can assess their winners with a higher confidence, right? And so it's interesting that if done well, AI can increase both your depth and your breadth, right? Breadth and your depth, which is in general a a good signal. I'll leave it at that. And without any specifics, have you found similarly that's allowed you to research more companies more thoroughly, bring in more information that you would never have been able to try to evaluate or even dive into in the past because of the tools and the swarm that you've built.
Yeah, this is aligned with what I'm seeing as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the way that I look at it is that for us, AI has a lot of different uses. So
Mm-hmm.
breadth and depth, that's inherently part of our system. So again,
Mm-hmm.
we had the luxury of not going from a manual operation into AI.
Yep.
We built it with that with these tools in mind.
Mm-hmm.
The second piece is that yeah, as far as the what you mentioned, the speed of running these experiments, and you have
Mm-hmm.
an idea, you wanted to implement it, these models would enable you to make it faster and faster, right?
Yep.
And this is we always seen that in computer science history, right? So 50 years ago or even more, people were writing assembly code, so machine code, and it would,
Mm-hmm.
for a simple project to be completed, you kind of need to have 100 people working on it. For example, back in the day in IBM using our
Yeah.
mainframe, and then we
Or even
would come
before
up
that
with,
with tubes.
yep, exactly. And yeah, so it got better. We got higher level languages.
Yeah.
We had more, and right now this is the latest layer on top of all everything. You kind of need to walk with these tools, and these tools would make your life a little bit easier if you know how to use them, and it would basically give you you can build things faster.
Yep.
But you kind of need to come up with the ideas and the creative ideas yourself. In any field that you are in finance, for example, you always wanted to experiment with couple of strategies. Right now you can do it faster, and
Mm-hmm.
these tools can help you do that. If you wanted to combine with different things, you go breadth and depth, it would help you with that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you hit something. I'm so glad you mentioned it because it's something that I should have pointed out in this example. So, one, the managers that were not able to scale breadth and depth were the managers that were using just the top-down AI tools. They spent way too much time researching the hallucinations and double checking the work. You still need to do that even with really good tools, but you just do a lot less of it, right? But what each of these managers had, even the ones that were bad with the top-down AI, but the ones that build their own custom tools effectively to scale breadth and depth and to actually have that be effective in achieving what they're trying to achieve for their investors was that they were building tools around their ideas, meaning they all had different ways of investing, different ways of defining what an opportunity is or a driver is that they felt would be the engine of value creation for their clients, for their vehicles. And so they built very specialized AI tools or workflows to research their ideas and quantify their ideas. These weren't going to the AI and saying find value. I'm going to build a tool for you to find value. It was more of no, this is how I define value. This is what I define as a good opportunity, and then they built a tool to find that good opportunity, those types of opportunities. Tell me a little bit more. Is that how, in general, how you're looking at building around your ideas? Any different angles that the people watching should consider?
Yeah, exactly. This is exactly how we approach it, right? So we do. I personally do have a lot of ideas. As scientists, you always have ideas that you wanted to try out, and these tools can help you achieve that faster, right? So we
No.
we are building AI, and we using AI to build more AI, basically.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's kind
Understand
of
that. That
a
makes sense.
kind of a
That's it.
cycle.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So what I usually say, and this is just an analogy in a different space. But if you so for example, AI can help you write a book, right? But it doesn't give you the idea for Harry Potter, for example, right?
Yep. There you
But
go.
if
Yep.
you have the idea for Harry Potter and you kind of build that in your mind, you can talk to a frontier model, for example, today, and it would write the words for you. It would basically
Yeah.
write you a book pretty quickly, but you need to have that Harry Potter idea yourself. It doesn't give you a Harry
Yeah.
Potter idea.
Yeah. And you need to know, okay, I have this character named Harry or this character named Ron. Help me flesh that character out. But yeah, it's so important. I'll frame it in for our context here. AI does not replace the analyst or the investor. AI, if you are bad at what you do, if you have bad ideas, it's going to amplify your bad ideas. If you have good ideas, it's going to amplify your good ideas when built and employed correctly, right? And I think there's a big fear that AI is going to replace humans, and it will replace certain things, but that still opens up more opportunity for us to do other things well. But it sounds to me like you have with this great experience in AI and machine learning, all that stuff. But what you also have, hopefully, is good ideas. And so, let's kind of round out this podcast with just tell me kind of the types of ideas to the best you can. In generalized terms, where do you find your ideas? What type of ideas are you looking for? That without spilling any secret sauce, that are the types of ideas that you're trying to leverage.
Right. So the way that I approach it is basically on and since I'm a scientist, I use the scientific method, right?
Yep.
I was looking into, so basically it starts with the with questions that I usually have, and the
Mm-hmm.
questions comes from observations of particularly the market, right? So
Mm-hmm.
for example, I remember 20 years ago, and I wrote a tweet about that as well. The Google and Yahoo was trading on the same multiple, on the same P multiple. And I was taking a look at it and said, okay, what's going on here? That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, because one's algorithmic, one had a huge group of humans indexing, right?
Yeah, and the ideas basically comes from I run a bunch of experiments, and with those experiments, usually would answer some questions, and we would produce a lot more questions.
Mm.
And I would go on the next batch and the next batch and the next batch. Typically, it's all a bunch of small experiments, relatively small. And these experiments, and I have an idea, I have a hypothesis. I would run an experiment, test it out, and see the results. And I have a bunch of more based on that results.
Got it.
And it's
So it's
yeah,
not like a systematic thing. One of the matters, like again, I can't name them, that would increase their breadth and their depth. Well, we're looking for very specific type of opportunities in the market. While there are different flavors, because it could be a company in a different industry, there were a lot of shared characteristics to what would define a good opportunity for them. For you, it's not necessarily so rules based. You'll look at a company and you just have to figure out, well, why would it create value? Why may it do well in the future? You have a hypothesis that may be completely different than a hypothesis that you may have about another company, but you just use AI as a means of helping you test that hypothesis that much quicker.
yeah, that's right. And we typically this is one of the things that we do a little bit differently is that when you look at investors, they typically fit into a couple of boxes, right? So they're either
Mm.
for example, growth investor or value investor, momentum investors. They would just focus on a particular sector, or they would focus on a particular geo. But yeah, for us, there's basically I always say there's no box, right? We would look for value, right? So this is
Yeah.
but the way that we define value is a little bit different than
Yeah, it's
just
not the value
traditional.
versus growth. It's yeah,
Yeah,
understood. Understood. Well,
yeah.
where do you see the industry going with as AI advances? And what would be one thing you'd wanna say to other investors out there, investment managers out there, that they need to stay on top of, that they need to take into account as this industry is going to be fastly changing?
Yeah, I think that the finance industry is changing a lot, and I've seen a lot of folks that are using these tools, right? And remember, at the end of the day, these are tools that can enable you to do things faster. Those people are they are going to be basically having a competitive advantage moving forward, right?
Mhm.
And I've seen that, people that are using them correctly, they can be very successful. But there are incorrect way of using them as well. So you kind of need to be aware of that piece. And yeah, it's very exciting times. I think that a lot of a lot of mundane tasks that everyone's doing is going to be automated, which is a good thing. None of
Mhm.
us wants to do mundane tasks. And yeah, just everyone just focusing on the exciting parts and creative parts, and this is it's gonna change everyone's life.
That's amazing, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm one of the AI optimists. I could already see it doing great things for people in my life, in my world. It sounds like look, I'm, uh, our company's all about AI and helping investment analysts with AI, investment firms and teams. And it sounds to me like Ahuora's really knows its stuff. And I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. And I'd love to bring you back one day for a follow-up episode because there's so much more to unpack here. Thank you so much, Sia, for joining today.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate it.
Thanks everybody for joining us, and we hope you learned a lot. We'll see you for another episode of Scaling Alpha. Thank you. Bye.